Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ask an Analyst. This is the show where we take real questions from game teams and unpack them with people who are actually doing data work day to day. The last couple of episodes have been great. We've talked about in-game engagements and user acquisition with a couple of experts. If you haven't seen them, I recommend you go back and take a look. And today we are going to dive into A/B testing from a practical and operational perspective. To help us answer our audience question today, I'm joined by Vojtech Svoboda. Vojtech is a game analyst from HOMA with over 10 years of experience working in mid-core titles and complex production environments. He's built analytics setups from the ground up, working hands-on with both the analysis and data engineering piece of things. So a great perspective to bring today to this type of a question. He's translated messy data, messy A/B tests into real product decisions for game teams. So Vojtech, welcome to the show.
Hi, Allison. Thanks for having me. Currently I'm working with HOMA, which is a French large game mobile publisher on a casual to mid-core mobile title. It depends on who you ask, really. And we are currently in a soft launch phase, aiming to increase our ROAS, ramp it up, and hopefully release globally soon. Busy days.
Yeah, very busy days, I can imagine. Thanks for taking the time then to be here with us. Are you ready to dive into our audience question?
Sure, let's do it. It's going to be fun.
All right. All right. So this is the question we have for this episode. It is, we run A/B tests constantly, but the results are often too noisy or inconclusive. How do we know when a test actually tells us something we can act on? I think this is a good one. I'm pretty opinionated on A/B testing. Can we break it down a little bit? I want to start maybe with that noisy and inconclusive. So when you hear something like that, what's the first underlying issue that you suspect?
Yeah, definitely it's a good one, but also a complex one. So yeah, definitely let's try to break it down. But first, let's take a step back and pick the right methodology for experiment setup and evaluation. In general, there are these two popular approaches to statistical testing. The first one is the traditional null hypothesis testing, aka the frequentist approach, with p-values and such. And there's the Bayesian approach. And I'm going to argue, through our whole discussion, I'm going to argue that if you follow the Bayesian approach, you'll avoid many of the issues outlined in the submitted questions. So bear in mind, I'll be speaking with the Bayesian approach in my mind.
Yeah. Tell me about the difference then between frequency testing and Bayesian. Why do you dive into Bayesian? It is what GameAnalytics uses with our A/B testing approach, that with bootstrapping. My understanding of it is that the Bayesian approach is about this probability. So it kind of leads into business questions a little bit more. But what is your perspective on that? Like, why this particular methodology?
There are concrete reasons why the Bayesian framework should be, I think, the preferred choice in our fast-paced industry, and why the biggest and most successful studios use that. First is the test setup, which is way easier to follow. Following the frequentist one, it's way easier to make a critical mistake that actually makes the results invalid. And it's the test interpretability. There's only a few people I know who really understand what p-values are, how it relates to the sample size and such. So definitely, if you're new to the topic, I encourage you to study up, read some articles. There's plenty of them online. Consider switching the frameworks. It will make your life easier, and not as just data analyst, but with working, collaborating, across the studio, across different responsibilities.
Yeah, when I very first started in the industry, I come from a business background. And then as a game analyst, I was paired with a data scientist who really knew, and a PhD statistician, no less, who really knew what was going on, with the statistics side of things. But then like in practicality, like really running with and operating within a business, these people are few and far between. Your PhD statisticians working in industry. I was a lucky one. So yeah, I get it that the Bayesian is easier to interpret and work with and to kind of make decisions from. It has more to do with this. Again, I'm not a PhD statistician.
Neither am I.
Yeah. So we can take a very operational, perspective as well on this, that it is about what you're doing with the A/B test and the questions you're trying to answer through them. So we have this Bayesian framework. Get to the beginning of setting up an A/B test in the first place to make sure that the data that you're getting, isn't noisy and inconclusive as this person is struggling with.
Yeah. So with this Bayesian approach in mind, when I hear noisy and inconclusive, the first thing that comes up my mind is that there probably were great expectations, but the reality did not live up to them. I imagine you spent days, designing and implementing a variant of your game, thinking the change would uplift your numbers significantly, but then the A/B test reality check steps in and tells a different story. Either the variants are not that different, or they're not different at all, or maybe just the magnitude of the change isn't what you hoped for, meaning that it's less than the desired minimum effect. That's the most common issue that I've experienced.
Can you give an example of a test that you've seen that hit these things, that maybe felt reasonable on paper, but then in hindsight was not getting a clear answer?
Definitely, yeah. That's a good question. Often when I talk with game designers or product owners, change they see as a major game changer actually has a negligible effect on KPIs. That's the hard truth. As an example, in the past, I tested different sequences of feature unlocks during the player onboarding phase. In the control group, in the variant a new PvE game mode unlocked at player level, say 5, and at player level 10, the PvP game mode unlocked. And the variant B, it was the other way around. So you can see why game designers might think that this is a major change to the player experience. You can see the reasons why, right? But long story short, the test really showed zero change in any of our target KPIs. Or more typically, you could look at simple UI changes like button colors, button labels, background images. What do I know? Small changes to the game economy parameters. My piece of advice is cut the chase. Small changes on the input cause small changes on the output, period.
A lot of times when teams are working with A/B testing, they're needing larger changes to their game, maybe. And so A/B testing wouldn't necessarily get them, move them in the right direction. Are you saying that the A/B tests aren't a way to find what changes are needed to make a large change in the game?
No, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying if you plan to make an A/B test, you should aim for high impact changes and test those changes. Only big changes are changes you can measure with high confidence. We find ourselves in a high noise environment, and with confidence you can measure only high impact changes.
What kind of tests have you seen work to give very big results?
So when you make the decision to run an A/B test, really go wild, go crazy, and aim for these high impact changes. Small parameter changes in your stamina system, skip them. Removing the stamina system entirely, give it a shot. And that's the test we've run, and that's the test we've seen a significant uplift on, our target KPIs.
Okay, that's super interesting. So really big swinging with your test design.
Yes, take big swings.
Yeah. You're talking about kind of the small design changes, but when they are swinging for the fences in what they're testing, why do tests then become inconclusive at that point? Is it around the design of the test or the hypothesis you're trying to get to, or the product context?
Frankly, I have not seen that many tests that would do this big swing attempt to it, because people tend to be very careful, very cautious when it comes to the product. They don't want to damage it, which is reasonable. But that's also the reason why you often see inconclusive tests. And the statistical inconclusiveness, for me, it is a very frequentist concept. With the Bayesian approach, you always get a piece of information that you can use to make an informed decision. It always tells you something. This is unlike the frequentist approach, which tells you literally nothing if the p-value is greater than your desired threshold. The poorly designed tests that I've seen, they were not just inconclusive, actually, they were straight invalid. It was a direct result of misunderstanding the frequentist approach, misunderstanding p-values, incorrect result interpretation.
I see.
Typically, you might have also that experience that people see that, for example, p-value above 5% doesn't mean that there's no difference between the variants, right? It simply means we lack the evidence to say that they are different. And these are two completely different things. So they might be different. We just don't know that. So if you want to avoid this pitfall, very, very common pitfall, just go Bayesian.
So you were talking about as well at the beginning that it takes time and effort to set up the variance of the test in the first place. Understanding that it's the idea of kind of swinging for the fences with the test and running very big, tests on very big changes to the game. What other parameters or what other things are you thinking about when you're deciding to, whether running a test is worth running at all? One thing I'm thinking about here, just as an example, is kind of operationally, because one thing I've seen teams do is they might run a test on something, but then they're kind of unwilling actually to make a change one way or the other. You said, just speaking of taking out an entire system within the game, that might meet with a lot of resistance within the game teams to do that at all, right?
Once you have these high impact expectations in mind and they are set, you do need to pick target metrics. And just saying, well, I'm generally a fan of this holistic approach. I don't see that much room for it in A/B testing specifically. And people have sunk some time into developing features, and it's often difficult for them, or always difficult for them, to cut the loss. You know what I mean? And if you're, waiting for changes that would be accepted by everyone in the studio, then I think it's going to be a really long wait.
So we've talked a lot about what doesn't work with tests, also with particular methodologies. I want to flip around and talk about tests that do work. Before running a test, what decisions should a team be able to make if the results go one way or the other?
Okay, good question. So once your high impact expectations are set, you do need to pick target metrics. There was a notion of holistic approach in one of the questions. And while I'm generally a fan of holistic approach, I don't see that much room for it in A/B testing specifically. The main reason is that there is this, I must say, eternal struggle between monetization and retention, when uplifting one causes the other to decrease, and vice versa. So waiting for a change that uplifts both would be a really long wait. And I'm stressing the change part because we usually don't test new features, add in new game modes, social features, competitive elements, leaderboards. These are generally believed to uplift KPIs on all fronts. So in my opinion, you can rely on industry experience and just skip the testing phase. I've actually never tested adding a new feature to the game. But what we do test, it is typically a change in game parameters. So when you consider such a change, you usually do it, you should do it with a goal in mind, right? So, and the goal, it might differ depending on where you are in the production life cycle. You'll be looking at different KPIs in the technical phase, in the retention phase, monetization phase, or the ramp-up phase after global launch. Yeah. So, but no matter where you are, your experiment goal should be aligned with the product itself. The whole team, or at least the production side of it, should share a common goal, a common North Star. And given the reality of it, the North Star is likely gonna be ROI or ROAS. I believe you've had an episode on UA analytics, UA marketing, right? So yeah, that's the thing. UA is more important than ever. CPIs are through the roof, and achieving the break-even point is getting more and more difficult. So what's your experience?
Well, I think that's interesting based on these conversations that we've had, because a lot of the conversation was around actually the holistic view on UA. What is driving your cost and your ROAS? Like that can be broken down into its component parts as well and holistically looked at to understand why your ROAS is broken. So I think that's really interesting. You're saying with A/B testing that it's not about a holistic approach. It is about choosing one metric. That's what you were saying before, right? Like I'm choosing
Don't,
that this
don't-
needs to be driving retention or something,
yeah, don't, don't,
versus
don't,
kind of looking at everything together.
so don't get me wrong, I do generally prefer the holistic approach, but in A/B testing, it is beneficial to have a common goal, to have a common North Star, and to prioritize your metrics.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the retention phase, for example, you probably won't be looking at LTV, at ARPUs, just maybe because you don't have that many players, the features are not ready, so skip that. But generally, when your game is launched globally, you do need to reach that break-even point. And I think not just the A/B test, the whole studio should be focused on achieving that goal. And if you're focused on that, and if you're focused on uplifting LTV with the help of A/B testing, statistical testing, it will help you achieve that goal. So keep the focus.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense as well. That it's, still the holistic view of trying to drive the business from the different perspectives. But when you have a test and you're doing the work to set up the test and the variance, you said you should have a specific goal in mind when doing that. And it's hard to maybe design a test that hits on everything at once, knowing that eternal struggle you mentioned.
Yeah, it's really a never-ending trade-off, a never-ending effort to attempt to balance out monetization and retention. Increasing retention drops monetization, increasing monetization drops retention. That's what it is. Accept it.
That makes sense. What about the cadence of A/B testing in your experience? You said you're not testing new features in the game, for example, and I suppose that would be like post-launch. So at what phase in a game's life cycle is the most A/B testing happening?
The whole life cycle. A/B test as much as you can. LB test as much as you can. For as long as you have your player base large enough, run an A/B test. A/B tests are great source of information, of objective information that you can use for decision making. It does not mean, that you need to accept the variant. No, it's just a piece of information, treat it as such, learn something about the game, learn something about your player base, and leverage that for further decision making.
We've talked about how getting results that are good enough to act on really starts from the very beginning. But what about when a test isn't perfectly clean? How do you personally decide when an A/B test is good enough when the results are coming in?
That's a great question. Well, firstly, I never decide on follow-up actions on my own. I think it would be unwise to base your decision making solely on a test result. And there are always other factors to consider. There can be additional costs involved, and the measured magnitude might just not make up for them. One good example I can give you is when we tested one starting hero versus 3 starting heroes. So you can picture that in the control group, the initial hero was set, the player had no choice. And in the variant, the player had to choose one of 3 heroes as their initial one. Long story short, we measured a 0.5% uplift in day 1 retention. So we had a winner. The uplift was not a random fluctuation. But when we sit down with the team, the additional costs attached to the 3 hero version were too high to justify that small of an uplift. The game design complexity would increase, controlling the player onboarding would be more difficult, generally for designers. And also QA would have to do 3 walkthroughs instead of 1 for every future update. So it depends.
That's a super great example on the operational side of running a business and almost the strategic side, team resources, these types of things of, do we really want to make this change or not? So that's interesting.
Yeah. If the magnitude is too small to justify other costs, just go with the version that you prefer.
So for this listener, who seems to be drowning maybe a little bit in his A/B testing, one, maybe check the methodology. But if you have to narrow it down for this person, what is one thing that they should start doing, and maybe one thing that they should stop doing at this point?
So, dear listener, what you should do is aim big. Aim for high impact changes. And if you think that you're aiming for high impact change, double it, triple it. Aim for extremes. The thing is, when you aim for an extreme and see no real effect, it makes no sense to toy with the parameters. But if you do see an impactful change, then it is time to start fine-tuning. And what I think is what you should also stop doing is stop seeing A/B test as some kind of a holy testament, something that you're bound to follow. You're not. An A/B test is just a piece of information, an important one, yes, an objective one, yes, but it is still just a single source of information. Don't underestimate your experience, your knowledge of domain, or other analytical methods. I think that one good, deep, exploratory data analysis is better than 10 mediocre A/B tests.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Super great. All right. So we have two segments in Ask an Analyst. First one was our deep dive, but we want to also get into our rapid fire Q&A. We're receiving, now that these are out, we're receiving a lot of questions from users and listeners. So we want to get in as much advice as possible into this episode. Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. As our game grows, analytics feels harder. How should we handle setups for scale?
I think it's good that it feels harder, isn't it? Trust me, you don't want to work on hyper casual titles all the time. Easy is boring. Sorry, team. And regarding the setup for scale, if you don't play for scale right from the start, you're in for a big trouble when you eventually get there. And I think everybody wants to get there, right? That's why we're in this business. So if your backend doesn't keep up with the scale and you need to rebuild it from scratch, frankly, I'm just glad it's not me.
Yeah. So many people in data roles like ourselves have been in that situation where things are falling down at scale. So yeah, definitely one to avoid. Next question. We sometimes see conflicting results across metrics in tests. How do you decide which metric should win?
I think we've touched already upon that. And the thing is that I really can't decide that for you, sorry. You'll need to decide it on your own. I don't know your game. I don't know the context. I don't know where you are in the game's life cycle. Pick the metrics that align with your studio's mission.
All right, last question. How can I handle experimentation in features that affect the economy?
I think purely from the experiment perspective, the same way you experiment with any other feature. But yeah, but just because this is a game economy feature and you're likely more interested in long-term results, you need to plan for a longer runtime. But maybe if a player backlash is your concern, in my experience, don't worry about it. I've never encountered a case where a player complained about having an IP that's more expensive than their friends. If that happens, just be open about it.
That's great perspective for sure. What happens in reality versus what we think might happen.
Yes.
Nice. Thanks again for joining us today. This was great. Really grounded conversation. We also went into the methodologies, and I think a lot of teams are going to recognize themselves in the examples that you shared and the context that you gave. So thank you very much.